Bender had always thought human lives were utterly fragile, but he, as a robot, was a whole different story. He was equipped with a wireless backup device that saved a copy of his data every single day. If he ever kicked the bucket, all he had to do was swap out his body and he'd be good as new. The only human he'd ever respected was Inspector Number 5, the guy who'd conducted his initial evaluation. Bender was in the middle of sneering at how fragile humans were when Professor Farnsworth suddenly noticed he was leaking oil.
Impossible! I'm triple sealed to prevent any chance of...
The professor ran a diagnostic on Bender's chassis, only to find that the leak was a symptom of a fatal hardware flaw. Worse still, Bender didn't even have a backup device at all, which meant if Bender died this time, he'd be gone for good. Bender couldn't wrap his head around that truth. He made up his mind to track down Inspector Number 5 and demand an explanation for what had happened. But inspectors were high-ranking bureaucrats. Regular folks like him could never get an audience with one. Seeing no other way out, Bender begged Hermes, who was a bureaucrat himself, for a favor. Hermes agreed. Before they left, Hermes handed off his paperwork duties to Leela temporarily. Then he took Bender to the bureaucracy center, disguising him as his personal pencil sharpener to sneak him in. Hermes headed to his desk and tried to look up Inspector Number 5's file on his computer, only to find that every single record of the inspector had been wiped clean. So Hermes led Bender down to the archives, where all inspector files were supposed to be stored. But lo and behold, there wasn't a trace of Inspector Number 5 there either. With all leads drying up, they had no choice but to head back empty-handed. On the way out, Bender ducked into a phone booth. He called Mom and filed a complaint about the defective product she'd sold him. Mom's response was swift. She immediately tracked Bender's location and sent her hit robots after him. She wasn't about to let a faulty unit ruin her company's reputation, so she decided to have Bender terminated for good. Bender and Hermes were forced to go on the run. They bolted all the way to the train tracks, hopped onto a passing freight train, and used a dark tunnel to shake off their pursuers. The train eventually chugged into its final stop, Mexico. They were now just a stone's throw away from Tijuana, the very city where Bender had been assembled. He figured Inspector Number 5 might still be hanging around there. But when they arrived, they found the robot factory where he'd been built had long since shut down. Still, Bender managed to dig up an old employee roster in a nearby dumpster, and there, listed on the sheet, was Inspector Number 5's home address. Bender followed the address to a rundown house, only to find it looked like no one had lived there for years. The sight crushed him. He couldn't bear the thought that his life was just as fragile as a human's. Thankfully, Hermes stepped in to comfort him, urging Bender to make the most of the time he had left. His words managed to lift Bender's spirits, but not for long. The hit robots caught up to them right then and there. Hermes told Bender to sneak out through the back door while he hacked into Inspector Number 5's old terminal to forge a fake death certificate for Bender. Hermes pulled it off. As soon as the Bender deceased signal went out, the hit robots shut down instantly, but the house collapsed as well. Bender was convinced Hermes had been killed in the blast, until Hermes emerged from the rubble, completely unscathed, not even bothering to glance at the epic explosion behind him. When Hermes and Bender finally made it back to Planet Express, they found the place in total chaos. Turned out Leela had been